And one. Sometimes when I hit record and I watch that countdown, I'm like, can't I just hit record and it start recording already?
Yeah. Give me 5 seconds of my life back.
Yeah, I'll never get that back.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I get good light in here, but right now I haven't sat out here in the morning in a while, and if the sun's like beating on this window, then it just gets hot.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, crazy week. You were watching. What did you say? You were watching the Open.
Oh
Did
yeah.
did you finish? Did it finish?
It's still on as we're recording, but it's a bit of a runaway. So it was actually a really good event. Royal Liverpool, where they played at. So the last time Rory won there, and then the previous time Tiger won there. So a lot of pedigree with that specific venue. It was a good event. The winner is going to be -13, -14. Brian Harman looks like he's going to win. Probably a bit of a runaway. And I mean, obviously a dark horse is not a guy who wins a lot of events or is really a household name in any way, but played well, just consistently got his way around the course, made enough putts and looks like he's going to take it. So it was a good event. It was raining today, so it was always fun to see those guys. Not that you want to see them struggle, but see them play in conditions that are less ideal, because you just realize, how good they are, even when it's miserable and cold out. And you and I would just go, into the clubhouse and start drinking. These guys are, they tilt their caps backwards, and they're ready to go.
I'm reminded of the old joke that we used to have where it's like, yeah, I had a great round, and I shot a 91, and we'd say, well, Brian, and you know who I'm talking about, you got to play more than 12 holes.
Yeah, that
right?
doesn't count as 9. Yeah.
That doesn't count. It doesn't count. Speaking of runaways, not runaways, but speaking of good putts. So Danielle and I'm not going to say I played. We went with her folks yesterday. They like to play and get out, and we've played with them a lot before. I have committed myself to taking the year off of golf. I haven't played yet this year.
Okay.
I haven't even swung a club, and I'm actively avoiding it because I think I need the year off.
Fair.
Yeah. I need the year off to get an appreciation for the game back, because of how I had my best round of golf ever last year, and no, the year before, but I had a number of really good rounds that were low 80s, 81, 82. And that's good for me, and I'm more than happy with that. I don't need to perfect my game beyond that. But I also had unquestionably the worst round of golf I had last year, and that's how I finished the year. And I was having some issues with like in my shoulder, with I got a pinched nerve and a bunch of other excuses, but the reality was I just didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's the best part, to me, the best part of golf. I've done that in the past too, just not played for a little while, and you come back to it and you start to kind of, it's almost like a bit of a reset, and you get a chance to, enjoy the aspects of the game that you want. Obviously your expectations go down a little bit because you haven't played in a while. So it just becomes about being out there and, being out there with, friends and family and, having some drinks and being outside. And it's less about the game itself. But I think sometimes that takes a bit of a pause from the game in order to get back to that level, because you play all the time and then you can't help but want to feel like you should be getting better, or that when you're not, and the endless number of improvements and checks on your game that you have to make it. It's pretty tiring. It can become a grind, but I think, I'd encourage you to take the year off if that's where your headspace is at, because I think you'll come back and enjoy it more.
Well, that's where it is, and I'm quite confident enough in my game that I'll be able to come back and within a few rounds next year, and by next year, I would consider a Calgary season my year off. So if we get into January and you and I want to go and play on the Lower Mainland or on the island, I'd be willing to get out and warm up the blood over 9 holes, or maybe even 18, and get out and swing. And I'm confident that I'll get back to, that 10, 12 handicap that I've consistently been at for the last few years, and which I'm more than satisfied with. I'm
just like riding a bike.
Exactly. But anyway, so I was caddy and driver for Danielle yesterday. She was hitting every fairway pretty much every time.
Nice.
She doesn't drive a long ball, but what was better, Hergy? Hole 1, she had a 3-putt. Everything else was lopsided 1-putt and 2-putt. And so
That's
she was
great.
draining some long ones, and I was really impressed. So I'm like, yeah, okay, I can remember what that feels like, and I'm like, okay, I can get back into this maybe next year. But I was
Yeah.
still very content not playing. You speaking of runaways, did you watch any of the race this morning? Hungarian GP?
So I had split channels going on this morning.
Okay.
So I had the sound on for the golf and I had the video on for for the Hungarian. It was a tough morning to decide. That combined with a late night last night. So it was a fun morning to stay in bed. Um,
Yeah,
Tell me
I
your
watched.
impressions. What did you think? I mean, obviously, not the most exciting result or most exciting race, but a good result nonetheless.
You know what made it exciting going into it is that Lewis Hamilton had the pole. So Max didn't get the pole. So we thought, okay, well, maybe there's a shot because the Mercedes, some of the improvements they've made, the Mercedes cars are looking really good and they got great drivers. So they're getting up there and they're gaining a lot of traction. So is McLaren. McLaren's been gaining a lot of traction. And I like to see Lando do well. I was about to say Lando, friend of the show. No, we profiled his personal McLaren. He's not a friend of the show. We like him. I'm sure he'd have a fun time hanging out with us.
Maybe he will be a friend of the show.
Maybe he will be.
Maybe he just needed the invitation to come on and chat with us.
There we go. Consider
Consider
that
that a formal invitation. Yeah.
it is an open invitation to Lando Norris to join us on 0 to 60 radio at any time. Anytime. We'll just send him the link. He can join him ad hoc if he wants.
Yeah, man. We'll start this on Wednesday. We'll do a Wednesday podcast if he wants. We're flexible in time. So
Yeah.
our traditional Friday routine. We'll break that for Lando.
Well, yeah. We'll break it for Lando. We're breaking it for ourselves right now. It's Sunday morning. This is the first time we've done a completely sober AM show. And I'm not saying that we're a couple of drunks or potheads, but usually we do it on an evening on a weekend, and so we indulge a little bit and get a bit
Yeah,
lubricated.
it's like the inaugural Cars and Coffee edition of
It
0 to
really
60
is.
Radio. Yeah.
It really is. My impressions were really good. Lando came in second, which really means in this day and age that he almost came in first because the runaway with Max being 30 plus, I think it was 36 seconds and change ahead, and he pitted late and still managed to gain. And his response, or not his response, but his the statement he made was, "Oh yeah, that was a really enjoyable drive today." Yeah, because that's all you did. You just drove. You didn't he didn't have to battle. Once after turn one, he got ahead of Lewis and he was ahead.
Yeah.
But there was some really good driving today. Checo did well. Lando did well. Danny Ricciardo, good to see him back on the grid,
Yeah,
and he
absolutely.
held firm in P13. And I think he did better than Yuki Tsunoda, which says a lot. I think he's gonna come back, and I think with the right car and on the right team, and I think he's within the Red Bull organization. I think he's gonna do well.
Yeah,
So if he gets
nice.
back into a blue car, I think he's gonna do very well. But it's just good to see him back on the grid. It was a fun race,
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
but an early one. Ugh, what a grind! I think it started at 6 a.m. my time, so 5 a.m. your time, and
Yeah,
I tried to get up early enough. I think I joined it about 20 laps in, but it was good. It was a fun
yeah,
race.
good stuff.
Um, I wanted to let you know, by the way, we've been talking about watch allocations quite a lot and what you and I are holding out for, as more of a joint venture kind of play. So I did put down for a Red Bull Alenghi Racing Tudor Pelagos as well.
Perfect, perfect.
So
Oh,
I don't know
that's
if you have, but you should go and put down for that too.
I
And we'll
have
just see
already.
whoever gets the first allocation.
Yeah, this one would be a tough one to to
I
let
don't know
go
if
out
it's
of
a
the.
flip.
Yeah, I was just gonna say tough to let go of the collection if you could actually acquire this piece. I was looking a little bit more. They came out with the full black ceramic
I
Black
saw
Bay
that. Yes.
at 41 mil black strap. You start to think between those two watches what you like more. I guess to me it's a material question. Like, do you want the ceramic, which comes with a lot of benefits in terms of weight and durability, or do you like that more carbon, titanium case? And I think they've, in fairness, now they've kind of opened the options up to the consumer, and the consumer gets to decide. I think maybe it's a bit of a colorway issue too. If you like the the kind of stealth black mode. look, I think that you buy the ceramic, and if you like the more, maybe a little bit showy or maybe a little bit more of a conversation piece, um, then you probably buy the Red Bull one. So I mean, good for them. I think they're doing well. As we said on the previous podcast, 42, 43, and now 41 mil. Um, at least now you've got the range of options to decide in terms of case size and, what you feel best on your wrist. But I imagine weight is probably very similar.
Mm-hmm.
You basically have the same movement in it, more or less. Not in chronograph,
No,
time
it's
only.
time only, right?
It is a time only,
It
the
is time
ceramic
only. They
one.
haven't
Yeah.
dropped a chrono. They haven't dropped a Black Bay chrono in the ceramic yet. I
Not
wonder what's your prediction on that. I think they will.
Can't be far behind. Yeah,
Right?
I imagine it's probably, if not like imminent, then, very quickly. Ceramic is popular. You can see it. You see it in so many watches. I think it's just going back to the kind of their history of like, how do we do better with, materials? How do we do better with weight? Obviously very durable. So you get, you don't have to sacrifice a lot in order to get those weight savings. And from a stainless steel standpoint, I don't know if stainless steel is finished by any way, but maybe people are looking for something that that shows a little bit better than stainless. So I imagine the chrono's coming.
I
It
think
might be
that's
a
it.
case size thing again. Who knows?
Well, maybe not. And the reason why I say maybe not is that ceramic, like to your point, testing of different materials, I would say is a bit newer to Tudor. It's been titanium and it's been steel and it's been gold, right?
Very much so.
So testing outside of that, which is interesting. I would speculate, being Rolex sister brand at Tudor, that they can use it as a proving ground for certain things, and then maybe translate that into a modern version in a few years of, say, like a sub or a Yachtmaster in ceramic, because they're already using ceramic bezels on Submariners, and that's only been in what, the last 15 years,
I think that's a really
15
good
20
point.
years.
That point that Tudor is a little bit of that, they get to experiment a little bit more with Tudor, and they get that proving ground. I remember there was talk, this was probably 2 or 3 years ago, where they talked about online sales for Tudor, and they were going to explore that non-AD model and kind of a more direct to consumer offering through an online marketplace.
Yeah.
Hasn't come to fruition. There's probably a lot of pushback from the ADs who already have limited stock to think that they would get even fewer allocations if they have to split the market between the online and the AD. But yeah, I mean, I think to speak to Rolex's kind of philosophy or sales and marketing strategy, I think they try a lot in Tudor, and then presuming it's successful, and it seems like it already is from a lot of the comments I'm reading. This is going to be really well received. Maybe it makes it into a Rolex. I think that would be pretty awesome to see a no date sub in ceramic, or man, a Daytona or a Sea Dweller. I mean, you go across the line, and I think it would be popular. I don't think there would be any model that you would want to
I
see
think
that
you're right.
excluded from.
I think you're right. I think there's always going to be the traditional. Now let's I don't want to completely shift gears to cars, but I do want to make an analogy here with cars. I
Yeah.
think now we're seeing this. Um, maybe it's not. I don't want to get on a runaway and try and make it fit into like the VW automotive group. But if you think about the traditionalist, Porsche buyer or 911 buyer. Sorry, I'm dropping shit all over my garage. Anyway, think about the traditionalist 911 or Porsche buyer. There's going to be the buyer, and I would say, um, maybe someone like yourself, at least initially with your first 718, and I think even with your dad and his first GT4, you're gravitating towards the modern version of a vintage aesthetic and pedigree, if that makes sense. But you're gravitating towards the modern version of that. You see that there's where they started may have been great at the time, but that's not where you want to be right now. But you understand that there is clout in this brand, and
Yeah.
there's a cachet to the engineering and everything that goes along with the mark. Um, and then there's maybe a buyer who's like, the new stuff's great, but that's not what got me into the brand. I want the vintage. I want the analog. I want the mechanical everything. Um, And then I think as you start to sample both, you start to appreciate the broader spectrum. So
Absolutely.
even yourself, and I think even your dad, where the three of us have been together at unveilings at Porsche Center Calgary when they're unveiling the Taycan or the 992. And we've all talked, and they always have customer cars and a lot of air cooled stuff in there to showcase. That's what I'm gravitating towards. And you guys were gravitating more towards the new. And I think we've started to see a significant cross pollination, even just with the three of us in our little ecosystem, that I'm getting more interested in some of the new stuff. And you guys are starting to say, okay, well, maybe there is something to the vintage. Maybe
Yeah,
there is a place for it in my shed, right?
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that,
that's
and tying back to watches, I think that makes a lot of sense too, where there's an appreciation for the vintage and where it all started, where we've gone through, and then how can we just tweak it a little bit and make it just a little bit better.
yeah, yeah. I think it's spot on. I think, well, and Rolex is gets faulted for this, and at the same time, it's kind of what you can almost celebrate about Rolex. Don't they don't take massive left turns where there's an entirely new product range every 2 to 3 years and consumers are kind of like in a dizzying effect trying to keep up. They make like very subtle iterations on things that obviously sell very well, different colorways, different materials, different movements, more precision, ceramic, and titanium and materials. uh, but they don't throw you for a loop when they come out with a new design. So to some extent, the buyer goes like, okay, I may like something from the 2015 to 2023 vintage, or I may like something that's very minimally different, but has a little bit more of what I'm looking for. Maybe not a ceramic dial, or maybe not necessarily to move into a more precious metals, and you can do it in steel. I think that's kind of cool, and it keeps the buyer a little bit more kind of in line. Porsche is exactly the same way, right? You're not seeing all of a sudden, something that throws us for a loop, and I like that. I like that predictability there,
Totally.
and then it doesn't feel like the older generation is getting so burned by like the newest limited edition shit that they can't get, that now the marketplace shifts entirely towards. So there's some kind of durability in your purchase, knowing that you're not going to get blindsided by something that's going to be revolutionarily different, to the extent that nobody wants the old stuff.
I think that's it. I think you've just hit it there, is that um, everything in this kind of realm that we're talking about, um, it may not retain or escalate always in value, but it always retains its significance in kind of that line of product, if you will.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
I agree. I
I
agree.
think everything. I think every single turn that they've made, Tudor Rolex. Let's pick on them and continue to pick on them. Every turn they've made has retained a significance. In each reference number, there's always a buyer and there's always a value point. I mean, that's thanks, Captain Obvious. I know, right? Like I'm
But
stating
if you
the
look at
obvious,
that
but
compared to say Breitling, for example, like the Breitlings of 2010, I would argue that even on chrono there probably isn't really a marketplace for them. They were way oversized. The
way
movement was not in house. The designs were like kind of
very
way too
distinct.
very yeah, very
Yeah,
distinct, but maybe not necessarily in the most like refined classical way, like a little bit over the top, slightly douchebaggy.
yeah.
Whereas now
No
the
offense to
brand
anybody, by the way, that owns
yeah,
one of those, but I think they know it. Like they were all very polished stainless steel. They were
yeah, in
very
your
big
face.
and very jeweled and very, yeah. It was very in your face.
Exactly. To the extent that you saw somebody who wore a Breitling and you were like, oh, that's a Breitling, right? Now you can see the case sizes have slimmed down. The colors are a little bit more refined, in house movement. They've taken their brand and they've really kind of progressed it and evolved it, but distinctly different than what it was before. To the extent that I don't think if you were a Breitling buyer, you would have the same feeling of like, oh, it can be one or the other, and they're kind of equivalent. I think the more sophisticated buyer who wants good in-house movement really can't go back much more than 10 years.
No,
Otherwise they're out of that ballpark. So
it's a
to
different watch.
speak to
Yeah.
Rolex, you have that feeling of continuity here that I think really speaks to the kind of long lasting ownership experience of a Rolex, and then allows a marketplace to develop for the vintage stuff.
So in that, I mean, I think we could confidently say, at least in our opinions, that there's a lot of synergies with Rolex. I would say really Tudor Rolex, both of them. As I know they're not one brand, but there's an affiliation there. And I would say that the Tudor brand can be very base Carrera, maybe even Carrera S, but base Carrera, base 718
Yeah.
from a sports car perspective. And when you get beyond, say, a Carrera S or 4S, maybe that's all Tudor. When you get into GTS and anything else, now you're getting into Rolex, because now there is more of I can go and I can walk in, not to most of our dealers in Canada, but some dealers that actually do have inventory, and I could buy a brand new Carrera today, right, and drive it home. In very few cases, but I could go and I could submit one even at Porsche Center Calgary. I could go and submit an order today, and it's just going to
MPO.
take the time to get it. I don't need an
Yeah.
allocation to get a base Carrera.
Yeah.
But as soon as I get into that GTS territory and above, now I need to develop a relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
But I can also have a little bit more, say a little bit more carte blanche on the configuration of that, because I'm into an area of car that, no matter what it is, it's my allocation. I can do what I want. The
Yeah.
Carrera, they might pressure you a little bit more to be like, well, you need to have a full leather package, or you need to have, you know, more than just the minimal. So we're gonna load it up with Sport Chrono. You can't get a manual anymore, so unless it's a Carrera T. So now you got to have a PDK, and you got to have this, and you got to have. So they try and, as you know, try and steer your configuration a little bit more on some cars versus others. But
Yeah.
the point I'm trying to make is that you can have a new Carrera 4 or a new Carrera S, just the same way that you can walk into some ADs and just buy a Tudor and wear it out.
Sure. Exactly.
So I think there's definitely some parallels between the brands. But you made an interesting point about Breitling. Is there, and I don't know if we can answer this. We might have to think about this, and it's not that profound, to be honest. But what's the car brand that would be associated or have a similarity to a Breitling that did stuff that was expensive and big and in your face that people wanted, and more, and was available? That's the other thing. And then they kind of reverted back to something that's a bit more realistic. I don't know. I was trying to think of one. I was going to say, is it Lambo? Because Lambo will sell you a car. You don't need to be anybody. You can just be like every millionaire YouTuber from the age 18 to 24 has a fucking Lamborghini. And you can do whatever you want with them, and they are very in your face.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they've reverted the way that Breitling has, right? To be more of a really good in-house movement sport watch, right? So I don't know. I don't know that there is a car brand that has gone so far in that one direction and reverted back as quickly as Breitling had,
Yeah.
and I think has regenerated a new market, or at least a new demographic of buyer.
I think the Breitling market now, you can walk into a Breitling AD, and I think you have options. You can probably go as small as something like 39 mil. You can
Yeah,
still buy the 45, 46 millimeter kind of badge on your wrist if that's your take. But I also think that what they've done with dial colors is more interesting. What they've done with case materials is more interesting. Again,
straps,
movements, chronographs, straps. Yeah,
everything they've
it's
done.
it's an evolution for the brand, and I think that that speaks to it. Yeah, we should dig in, see if we can find a car equivalent.
Yeah, I'm
I
it's
think
really
you
piqued my
naturally
curiosity.
go to Bentley only because I think that Breitling Bentley partnership was so profound for so many years. But I don't know if, I
No,
mean, Bentley's
no,
has
you might
always
be onto
been.
something.
You think
You
so?
might be. Well, you might be because I don't think Bentley is making they went through a phase with like the Continental GT Speed and the Super Sports that was and even a GT3, right? Like they went through taking something that has been synonymous with um uh I would say has a racing pedigree. Bentley does, absolutely. But when Rolls-Royce owned them, they pulled back from that, became more luxury, practicality. Um, and then they started to get sporty again with when the Continental came out in what about 2003, I think, 2002
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah, this is really interesting.
And then they started to get more racy. But I don't think the Continental is a sports car. We kind of talked about them as a Grand Tourer last week.
Yeah.
Great Grand Tourer, but when you start to put a big wing on it, or you start to put, if it came with 20-inch wheels and you start to put 23s on this thing, it rides like shit.
Yeah.
Um, like they I don't. So I think you might be onto something because Bentley did revert from that. They still now they re-engineered and they have the latest version of the Continental out. There's the Mulsanne, and then the what's the Rolls Royce is the Culligan. What's the Bentayga is the SUV. So I think they have adapted to the market that made them successful to begin with, and I think maybe Breitling has kind of tried to do something similar. So
Yeah. Cool.
maybe there is some similarities there. I don't know. It's a good point.
Well, you and I should now we're
Drive a
influencers.
Bentley? Yeah, we should
Yeah,
definitely do that.
exactly. I was just gonna say you and I should get access so that we can fully develop our story here.
What if we start to do this every time we go on a trip somewhere with our wives or otherwise? We should try and just get something really crazy for a day on Turo,
Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be
right?
super
And
fun.
I don't mean drive crazy. I mean like let's get a Bentley, let's get an Aston, and then we can use that as to be like, well, it may not be a perfect review because this car has 23,000 miles on it, and somebody else has loaned it out to a lot of other idiots.
Yeah,
But here's our thoughts. I think that maybe we could do something like that and try
that
and
sounds
draw
good.
conclusions as to what's the closest watch brand. Maybe we could even get more particular and say what's the closest watch to this car,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Or
cool.
where, or almost pair it like wine.
Well, I don't think it'll be hard to find a Turo Bentley in Vancouver or Victoria for that matter. So it's probably more easily accessible than we think it is.
So here's to that point. Danielle said something, and I don't know if Misha's mentioned it to you, but when they were in Victoria, she's like, "There's like no luxury cars here." She's like, "I saw two 911s, or I think she said she saw two Porsches, and they're like not a lot of like even Lexus or Acura. It's much more practical. So I guess I'll be doing my car spotting on the mainland and in Yaletown,
Yeah.
um, which is fine. Um, but there is a Vancouver Island chapter for PCA, so I'm going to join that. Looking forward to getting out there.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome.
That was
You
a
know what
pretty
I
interesting
what
cold open for 28 minutes.
Yeah, man, we're doing well. We were texting before this, and
Yeah.
I was watching a review of the new M2.
Yes.
It came in this. I don't know what the color is called. It looks like a sky blue, baby blue kind of color with some kind of pretty interesting um,
I
interior
think it's
colors.
actually got like a little bit of a pearlescent or like a slight metallic in it, even.
Does
I'm
it?
not
Yeah,
sure. I have. I haven't seen that, but I've seen the press car in that color. So I know exactly the one you're talking
yeah.
about. And I'm glad you brought up the M2 because I did get a chance to look at one in person, inside and out, when
Oh,
I was
really?
getting my new rims rotated on. They had an
Interesting.
M2 show up at that shop. And so we were talking about it. And every single person, this is, I can't remember if I mentioned it before, it's Limitless Tires here in Calgary. And they do a ton of work on a lot of cool stuff. And every single one of us, every guy in the shop, Shane, who owns it, everyone's like, God, what an ugly fucking car. And I
Yeah.
genuinely do think that. I'm not a bandwagon jumper on this one. There's elements of it, I will admit, are starting to grow on me a little bit, but I really do think BMW has done it again in taking a model of a car that I think looks the package and the part.
In the
And
M4, is that what you?
no, I think the
Oh.
M4 is one of the ugliest fucking cars on the road. Same with the M3. That big stupid beaver grill. I don't care how much cooling you need. Figure out a better way, because again, you've taken a car that has been around since the E30 M3 and has been I would say a benchmark for a 2+2 European rear drive front engine sports car. Borderline sport. It's not technically a sports car, but and then they made it ugly. And I think they did the same thing with the M2. It's like they gave it to. It's like they said, "Hey Lego" or "Hey Playmobil, make us a version of the previous M2." And so it came out blocky and
Yeah.
very squared off. And I don't think it has the aesthetic of the previous version. Anyway,
So,
that was a
so
rant on my take. Please continue on
well,
what you
why
think
don't
of
we
this
go through this? Why
ugly
don't we go
fucking
through the
car.
specs? We can go
Sure.
through the numbers and give people some insight. And so this is the G87 now, right? That's their second
Okay,
gen M2. So
okay,
we've got 3-liter V6 producing 453 horsepower, 406 feet-pounds of torque. You've got 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds in manual and 4.1 seconds in automatic.
nice.
Top speed 250 kilometers an hour. And you have option between manual and automatic. And it to me it seems like they've taken a lot of the um, kind of power package. It just seems like a slightly detuned M4, a little
That's
bit
exactly what it is.
heavier than the previous gen M2. I think but obviously lighter than the M4, longer wheelbase, but obviously shorter than the M4. But I don't know. I'm curious to get your take. You think the M2 is going to be a seller, or do you think people buy the M4? By the way, the M2 has a small-ish back seat, so there's like some practicality, fold down seats. I mean, I don't think the buyer is upset that they buy the M2, but I'm not sure they are. I think you're paying a lot for the badge, and I'm not quite sure they've kind of hit the nail on the head. And you're right. From some of the styling here, to me, seems like a bit contrived, maybe a little
Yeah,
bit too. We just need to make a bulkier looking, 2 series. And I've driven that 2 series before. We
you
had
had
the
one. You
convertible,
had a
and
235.
it was pretty awesome. I mean, the size is nice, but our knock on the 235 was that it was underpowered, and so I guess this is maybe the graduation from the 2 series buyer that just wants some more power. But I don't know. I'm not sure it ticks all the boxes for me.
I think that's well. For starters, this is the first I've heard you say that your M235 was underpowered. Because I drove it a couple times, and I think if you just get used to that power, then sure you want more. But I would question, where are you going to use that additional power? Like the sweet spot in the previous gen for most buyers was actually the M235 or the
Yeah,
M240.
the 240 now. Yeah.
And the reason being is because the performance numbers were so close to the M2, but the price tag was like a $25,000 delta, Canadian. So you would save a good chunk of scratch on it, but you miss the aesthetic of the previous M2. Now I don't know that it matters as much. That being said, if I was looking at this kind of a car, these kind of performance numbers, to your point, the back seat is not so. Unless I really like the look of the 2 series, I'm going to go and buy a Toyota Supra,
Interesting.
because I'm going to get better performance out of the Supra marginally, but I'm going to get the same drivetrain. And I think it's a prettier package. And I know where we're going with this conversation, but I was going to say that's a closer comp to a Cayman GTS?
That was going to be my next question. Do the GTS buyer, you're paying a premium. I mean, this is, I was just on the site this morning. You're paying it's about 75 base for the M2. By the time you package it out, it's probably maybe you could add another 10 in options by the time you kind of, if you
Sure.
wanted to fully load it up. So you're at 85. There's a $20-ish thousand difference between that and the GTS. And then obviously GTS can add up with some of the accessories. So I wouldn't call it necessarily the exact from a cost comparison standpoint, but maybe from a performance standpoint, you've got 50 odd horsepower more in the M2, but the GTS is considerably lighter, maybe probably 200 or 300 pounds lighter, I'm guessing. So
Yeah.
I don't know, and I guess you and I have had this discussion a lot, but you have the M2 Drive versus the Porsche Drive, probably a more refined, little bit, more feedback. Obviously, I would like to suggest a better, you know, um, acoustic package from the mid-engine, naturally aspirated
Sure.
flat six versus a turbo. But I don't know. I mean,
No, I think you're on
from a
to.
0 to 60, you're probably pretty close.
Fuck, I need a bell. Every time we say 0 to 60, I need a bell.
Yeah, we just need to drop it enough so people realize that this
Yeah.
is what the podcast is.
So, so welcome everybody to 0 to 60 Radio.
Yeah, exactly.
6 minutes late.
If you've tuned in to 36 minutes later and you don't
Yeah.
know what you're listening to.
Yeah. Don't change that dial. It's a fucking podcast.
Yeah, don't
Anyway,
forward.
I think you're right though. I think the GTS is going to have better acoustics. When we say that, we mean like the actual engine sound and what you're going to see, or not see, but what you're going to hear and really feel and get that visceral experience. It's going to be different. It's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be better. I think that's going to be subjective. You and I are obviously biased. We'd lean towards a 718 over any BMW. But they're going to be completely different drives. This is the problem, and I think we talked about this: chasing the horsepower and the torque numbers, and 0 to 60 times. Ding. Chasing those metrics does not always lead you. Just getting something that's the fastest on paper does not lead you to the most fun experience in a car. There's a lot of cars out there that are extremely fast and beautiful to look at and very expensive that drive like junk.
Yeah.
We've talked about some of them. SLR.
And I don't think we're
McLaren.
necessarily saying that about this, right?
Not
we're
at
not
all.
saying this about the M2, but I know your point's well taken. Like if we're just chasing top line, this has 50 more horsepower. This is $20,000 cheaper. You can, on a fairly superficial level, you can go like, oh, the M2 is a better car, more value for money, more horsepower per dollar.
Yeah.
But when you actually go to a driving experience, and I hesitate slightly when I say that because I think you've got a 7-year-old 718 kind of technology and interface level, whereas here you're getting I think it's got almost a 20-inch touchscreen. It's probably from a materials and a construction and an interface
Sure.
level, it's probably a little bit more superior. I think it is superior, but then you've got to drive it.
But then you have to drive it.
And then I think the Porsche runs away.
And so, I mean, if you apply that to kind of your buying methodology for cars, then the 718 shouldn't even come into the equation. If you're looking for performance, numbers on paper, call it a little bit of bragging rights, but you're looking for the performance, the numbers on, and don't get me wrong, the new M2 is probably going to drive fantastic. I think it's better than any M3, M4. It's a smaller, better package. It just is. It's going to handle better. It's better balanced. There's a lot of good things about it. And it is, I think, about 150. It's only about 150 pounds lighter than an M4. But regardless, that means something. We used to say when I was drag racing, back when I was building Mustangs, that 100 pounds is a tenth of a second in a quarter mile.
Interesting,
right? So 100 pounds can matter. I'm not going to dismiss that. But if you want the interior from the M2, you want the touchscreen, you want the point, you want the infotainment and all that. You can get the quality in the Porsche, but if you want the experience of a massive touchscreen and all this other stuff, then wait for the new 718,
Right. Then you go electric.
right?
Yeah, I agree.
Or if you're gonna start leaning more into a 992, where you get more of the tech. But again, I go back to, if that's why you're buying, if that's why you're not even looking at a 718 GTS, then you're looking at a 718 Cayman S,
Yeah, sure.
right? Right? Because the numbers that you'll get, that the performance that you'll get out of a 718 Cayman S, it's not, I think you're going to have a more fun experience than you will in the M2. You're not going to be
Agreed.
as fast, but I
Yeah.
think it's going to be a hell of a lot more fun in a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder Cayman S.
Tuned up. Yeah.
No, forget tuned up.
No, I mean tuned up from the base, right? Tuned up from the base Cayman.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you get a Cayman S, not a base Cayman, which your base Cayman I drove, it was no slouch.
Oh
That the
man.
2-liter 4-cylinder is no slouch. It still gets up and it still is peppy and it's fun. I know where it lacks the power and where it lacked that extra excitement. And I think leapfrogging over the Cayman S for you into the GTS, I think, is the right move. But again, I'm going back to, if we're talking about the tech on the interior and infotainment, we're thinking about we're comparing the wrong cars.
I think you're spot on. I think it's probably maybe the thing that I don't know. This is tough because I don't know who buys the M2. Um, considering, just take money out of it just for a second. Who buys the M2 versus who buys the Porsche? I don't. Maybe you get a little bit more badge recognition. Maybe in that sky blue, maybe you start to get a little bit more attention to the car. Um, and I don't want to knock that buyer because I think there's lots of people that buy cars because they want to make a statement, and M2 probably makes maybe a bigger statement than a GTS makes from a notoriety kind of standpoint because it's an M car. And maybe you need to go into a 911 before you get that at Porsche. So maybe that's the M2 buyer. But otherwise, I struggle too. I think it's maybe the guy who doesn't want an M4, who doesn't want an M3, wants something that's a little bit smaller, a little bit more easy to manage, maybe slightly, um, likes that weight difference, likes the size of the 2 Series, that doesn't buy the 4 Series. But otherwise, I struggle to see who their kind of real target buyer is, and especially if you're saying that the 240 is like in a lot of ways.
I think for the $20,000 delta from a 240 to an M2, $25,000 easily. I think you can get you could do an M240 and put a baller set of like HRE rims on it and do all your PPF and ceramic coat and drive the wheels off of that thing under full warranty for under a 4-year lease and have a ton of fun for a significantly less dollar value.
Yeah. Well, maybe we've batted this around long enough. Maybe we should again try to drive these things and get firsthand experience, because who knows until you're behind the wheel what your
Just
true drive experience is like, and maybe it's powered enough that maybe you are, that's what you're in it for.
Yeah.
And you don't care so much about the precision and the feedback, and you have some sport buttons that you can hit on, and you're happy taking that thing out. But I mean, I guess we're biased, but I remain in the GTS camp.
And rightfully so. Unless you get that thing, and when you take delivery, and you go and give it the stick and enjoy it, and you say, you know what, this isn't really what I was expecting. I don't think that's going to be the case. Maybe we can talk about that for a few minutes, and I think we're going to. I don't have all morning, unfortunately, so I think we're going to have a shorter episode today. But that's okay. I am curious. What are you expecting for a driver experience when you take delivery of this new Cayman GTS last run? I'm so excited about this fucking car.
Yeah.
Last run of the gas powered Cayman in a 4-liter. Promise me, if you ever write this car off by wrapping it around a pole or something, I'm buying the engine.
You just want the engine? Yeah,
I just want the
exactly.
motor.
Man, it's such a different experience, and most, Porsche owners will understand this, especially with GT cars, that you don't actually get a chance to test drive this car before you buy it. It is an entirely novel experience the first time that you get behind the wheel of this, and very, very different than any other car that I've ever purchased. My 718 was the same. It adds a little bit to the excitement, but it also adds a little bit to the kind of nerve wracking, experience. Like, it's a significant outlay of cash, and am I going to really enjoy this to the extent that I'm getting what I perceive as value for money? Um, you lean on, obviously you have to, the pedigree of the brand, and I lean on the experience I had from the 718, which was that this was point and shoot. I've never felt like there was any time in that car where I had lost control of the back end, or that
Right.
I had to oversteer or understeer this car. What I just kind of found, and I think it was a little bit from the acoustics, was that it wasn't really kind of an enveloping experience. You got in it,
Hmm.
you had some fun, kind of knocking through the gears, but I never felt the feeling of kind of being one with that car. It was always a feeling of like, I can push this, but if I really just wanted to kind of like zone out, it felt like I could be driving anything. And what I'm hoping for with the GTS is that more kind of visceral experience, and that feeling of true power and true torque, that is kind of more of that wow factor. And I
Yeah.
maybe didn't have that in the base, and I'm hoping that it comes through. And from everything I've read and everything I've seen, um, it seems like that first and foremost will be the difference in the experience. But I'm also really excited just to get back into the car again, get back into the brand again. And I've had this kind
Yeah.
of 8 month hiatus, that's been
A long
admittedly
time.
very painful. um, but I think that's what I'm hoping for too, is just to kind of get back into the feeling of like, I'm having an experience when I drive this car. And every time I get into this car, it's an event in itself. And what that will mean from an experience in driving it, where you want to be in this car, you want to take it places, you want to go places, you want to be, you want it to be part of your lifestyle. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most. That was a long answer to a short question.
No, no, I think it was an excellent. I think it was an excellent answer. It's interesting. My where I went with that, and my question to you is: did you feel any of that visceral experience in the connection to the car when you drove my 997? Okay, so I think we've established that the smaller turbo 4 versus the flat 6, it's a very different sound, and it's a very different. And I mean, mine's only a 3.6, I know, but I think you did have that experience of the connection to the car and where you need to be in the gears, where the car is happy, where it can drive like a Corolla, very comfortable,
Yeah,
very easy to drive in day to day. But when you get up into the rev range, now it becomes it's not a Jekyll and Hyde. It's a it's a pinstripe suit versus a tracksuit when you want it to be, kind of thing, right?
absolutely.
And
I
I think that's what you're going to gain in your 718. Have you given much thought? We've talked always about this being a little bit of a buy and hold car. Have you given much thought of this being a stepping stone or an opportunity to flip into maybe another GT car or something else, even if it's not in the Porsche brand? Has that kind of crossed your mind at all?
well, it's really intriguing. I can see this car just because of, I mean, this is not new, but the very last iteration of a naturally aspirated car, it just doesn't feel like a car that's as transactional as a stepping stone kind of car. It feels more kind of foundational to the beginning of a car collection, wherever that goes and to whatever extent that is. It just feels like one of those cars that'd be really hard to let go, because that the next advancement is so different than what you had before. And maybe the electrics are just phenomenal and it's great, but in a lot of ways, I almost feel like this is like the perfect, a Cayman for me. And
Yeah,
I can get electric maybe somewhere else, or maybe in the brand, depending on how impressive the new one is. But that's the reason I don't think it's a you know it's a stepping stone car or a flip car, or anything that I feel like I wouldn't have for some kind of prolonged time. And when I got your help specking it out, I think I told you that, like, I'm more interested in specking this out for long-term ownership than I am just to kind
to
of
flip
get
it or
into
resale.
so there was some comfort options that I added that, if I wasn't, I don't think you're getting your money
Uh,
back for. But
I
I
think
bought it
the
because
way,
I know I want this for, call it 5 years or whatever
yeah,
whatever the kind of slightly elongated time period is.
I still go back to the way you spec'd it. And I was thinking about it this morning. I was out on my Sunday morning drive with mine. And I was like, was the rear wiper a right choice? And I was like, I would have done it. So it still stands. I still stand by that as the right choice, especially given the climate that you live in. Like Lower Mainland in Vancouver, there's a lot of rain, there's a lot of mist, there's a lot of moisture, and because it's your primary driver, you're going to be in traffic with it. And so and I like the practicality of that, but I also like that it's very Euro. It's a common Euro spec. Um, the other thing that really I think stands out the most to me is how you've spec the interior of this car. I think the blue seat belts. Did you do? Remind me, is it contrast stitching?
So that was the no, it wasn't. And
No,
I
because it
I
was
think
really expensive, right?
so. The trouble with the GTS package, we can go into this today or in another episode, but it did actually limit the some of the other customization that you could do
Yeah.
that I quite liked. And so it was a bit of a toss up. But what I really did like about the GTS package was the contrast stitching. But I don't have that. No, I just
Okay.
it's a black on
It's
black.
black on black,
Yeah.
but you did blue accent on the seat belts, and you did the Porsche crest embossed on the headrest as opposed to what the GTS package would have. Like your dad's has the GTS package, his
Correct.
991.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And it
you
has the GTS
yeah, embroidered,
embroidered
right?
in. Yeah,
With
which
the
is nice.
contrast stitching in red. Like I think it works. I get it. But what I like about how you spec it is I don't think there's a lot of GTS buyers that would spec it that way. Which
Ah,
tells me
interesting.
that a lot of that it's easy to say nope. I want everybody to know I have it, even on the inside. I want everybody to know this is a GTS. And this goes kind of a little bit to the whole putting the wrong badges on your car conversation that we've had, where it's like I love that you have given this such a bespoke. I think about it's such a bespoke feel. So I think about um, it's like when you get a suit made to measure. I haven't done this in a very long time. I'm sure you haven't in probably 10 plus years.
That's a
But
throwback.
the subtleties that you do where okay, well on the lapel, I want that lapel pin stitching to be a contrast color. I want the thread you use on the buttons to be a contrast color. I want the liner to be something really unique. And I think you do it because it's the subtle hits that people seldom see, but it's enough that they take notice. They don't figure out what's different, but they say, "Oh, that's a really good-looking car," or "That's a really good-looking suit." I think that's what you've done here, and I think you've done it quite successfully, and I can't wait to see it in person. Any word on the date? Because
Uh,
you got a new gift this week, didn't you?
I did. I got well, now we have a YouTube channel. I can profile it. So I got this very nice Porsche keyring with this full leather, and then it's got
At
the
the crest?
logo, yeah, in the crest, and it's a metal kind of stitch on, I guess. So this
Are
was
you
a
going to
nice.
use it?
I'm not sure. I hope so. I mean, I've got the one key ring that with the leather case. So I think the second one, if it's the same as the base, came as just the key. So if that's the case, then I'll put this on.
Here's my suggestion. You're
Okay.
going to have because you did not do. Did you do entry and drive?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so the key's never going to leave your pocket.
Correct.
So, but you have a key fob to get in and out of the garage, or is it
Yes.
a code?
No,
You
it's
know
a
what I'd
fob.
do? I'd put your key fob on. I'd put your key fob for the garage on that.
Okay, that's a good
and
way to
just
do it.
and just throw it in the console of the car or in the ashtray.
Yeah,
I'm sure you got the smoker's package.
I did. Yeah, only
Yeah.
because I don't like that hole.
No, but that's why it's a $0 package that gives you a door on the ashtray, and you can just
Yeah.
use it as a cubby. Or you could, unless you're ripping around Yaletown, barnstorming, smoking doobies, then
Yeah,
then it's
exactly.
not that. Anyway, that's another show.
That's for
Um,
yeah. That's where we don't admit our crimes in in a podcast.
we are going to be. We need to think about. We're going to be live in a couple weeks again.
That's right. Oh
Um,
yeah, that'll be
so
awesome.
so we should. I think I'll bring my mic. Um, or we have your mic too. We could let's just do one mic like we did the last live show. Maybe we could even do it on your balcony, or we could do it from the pub,
That'd be
something
fun
like
too.
that.
Yeah,
Um, that would be actually fun. Maybe we do it from a patio in Yaletown and just car spot.
that'd be
We
perfect,
could do
man.
man on the street. We'll interview people as they walk by. Hey, how would you like to be a guest on Zero? Just fuck off. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. I guess you're from
that's
Gastown.
yeah. You do not know anything about our podcast. I got our first, by the way, just quickly. I got our first in person shout out for 0 to 60. So I
No,
had
you didn't.
spoken to somebody, and we're waiting in line for ice cream, and whatever, we're talking about what we did and what we do, and I said, oh, we have this podcast 0 to 60, and this guy listened to it already. So he
No.
said, yeah, it was almost serendipitous. So we have I mean, he didn't recognize us in person. We're not yet on video, but he recognized the podcast. He said he had been a subscriber and he had listened to some of our previous episodes. He had an Audi e-tron, and he had just made the move from a Range Rover. So he was eagerly
Oh,
anticipating the new arrival of the e-tron. He thought it would be a more kind of refined, maybe slightly more elevated experience from
very
the
Vancouver, by the way, but not
yeah.
not in a bad way. I know of a friend of mine, a former colleague that he and his wife got out of. I can't remember what they were in, but they got into an e-tron. And I said, "How do you like it?" This was a few years ago, early in the pandemic, and he's like, "It's awesome. We love
Yeah,
this thing."
yeah.
So good for him. Did you get like did you get? Is there a username or anything you want to shout out, or did you know, or
Oh man, I got his first name, but I didn't get his handle. So
what's his first name?
his name was Craig. He was an
Okay, well,
Irish
shout out.
fellow.
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, we enjoyed listening. We enjoyed chatting in the ice cream parlor, and he said he'd forward He's first of all, he said he'd leave a review. We don't have enough reviews on the podcast. He said that he wasn't sure when he initially subscribed because it was a review-less podcast that he didn't know quite what he was getting into. But I assured him that it was well produced and well researched. So he's going to
I
leave a
got
review. I hope he's done so already. If not, here's a friendly reminder to Craig.
well, and I got from Brylars, at Brylars, who is also. I've given him a shout out before. His other handle is Manuel 996. Manuel underscore 996. It's Manuel.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. Anyway, he hit me up last week. Yeah, it was during Stampede Week, and he's like, "Just listen to the latest episode. Funny hearing them mention anytime, boys." But he said it was when we were talking about my new Black Bay, and he's like, "Cornerstone of Tudor relaunching into North America. Tudor hasn't sold in the continent for years. Black Bay was the only logical piece to relaunch." Anyway, he also said, because I said, it's probably something that I'll hand down. He's like, if you want to guarantee you don't sell that thing, get it engraved with your daughter or some other kid's name on it so that it's completely, immovable. Maybe I will do something like that. But I would love to get this person on. Maybe we can have him as a guest. I know I keep saying we'd love to have you on. We tried to organize to get Dan Jarman on this weekend. And just with conflicts in our schedules, it didn't work because I knew that Saturday was going to be the only day that worked for him. But we'll have to do him remote. That's awesome. I love that we're getting some shout outs. I love that we have
Yeah.
some listeners. Everybody, like, if sometimes we're a miss, sometimes we're a hit. Please be patient with us, but tell us if you guys are reaching out, or if you guys hit us on YouTube, hit us on Instagram is where I've been managing it. I'm trying to detach it from my personal account right now so that we can hand that off to our social media coordinator.
Yeah, we've got a
But
social media website.
please reach out to us. Tell us if there's other stuff you guys want to hear a profile of, um, or even questions you have for us, even if they're audacious ones like, what the fuck makes you guys think you're experts on anything? I've listened to 13
We're
episodes
not.
and you guys don't know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. That's fine too.
Yeah.
But no, I love getting the shout out and I love hearing that other people are listening. And I think
Oh yeah.
that's rad. We didn't even talk about we've been wanting to talk about the whole 3.2 Carrera market for a little while. Let's save that for next week.
Sure. Yeah,
And let's
that'll be
kind
a
of
good
profile
episode.
that.
And
Yeah.
I've got an independent watchmaker from Japan that I wanted to profile. Who makes
Okay.
some exceptionally cool dials that I think you'll instantly fall in love with at a really accessible price point. So I want to profile that, but we'll leave that as a teaser for next week as well.
Okay, that I'm actually very excited. Okay, so next week's episode, you've got a profile of an indie watchmaker again, which I think has been getting some really good response. People seem to like it, and especially when I talk to, when I talk to anyone from, even if it is like a Dan who has openly said, my cap for watches right now might be like 800 to $1,000,
Yeah,
which is a great watch budget if you want to get into start having some of these. And he's
absolutely.
gravitated to a moon's watch and that kind of stuff, or even people that are in there and spending 10, 15, $20,000 on timepieces still have an appreciation for indie watchmakers at a great price point.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm looking forward to that profile. And then let's open it up and talk a little bit about the 3.2 Carrera market, why it's a really sweet spot in air cooled stuff. And then maybe we'll be able to get a guest to talk about it as well too. But if nothing else, it'll be a crew show.
Yeah, perfect, man. And to speak to the feedback, we love feedback where we get it from our wives, but I don't know if we get too much other feedback. So we're more than happy to have people comment. We'll do our best to reply to any posts on the show. And as always, thanks for listening. This was actually fun. I like the cars and coffee take. It was a nice way to wake up to Sunday morning.
Might be our new Sunday morning routine. Who knows? We can always switch this up. All right, we'll leave it there for today. Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Good stuff.